I'm Paul Steigletter. I spent 30 years in law enforcement, beat cop to deputy sheriff, working 10 hours a day to protect and serve. Last year in Oregon, there were 13,000 citations and arrests for marijuana. Yes on 91 will allow law enforcement to focus on serious crimes, unsolved murders, rapes, missing kids. Measure 91 also mandates that Oregon develop standardized tests for driving under the influence, which we don't have now. That'll make our streets and highways safer. Yes on 91.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey! Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Thursday, October 23rd, 2014, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. So glad you could join us today. So much going on. We are just 12 days away from legalizing marijuana in Alaska, Oregon, and Washington, D.C., from legalizing medical marijuana in Guam and Florida, and we've got over 60 now votes that we'll be counting on Election Night 2014, Tuesday, November 4th. Join us here at 420radio.org for all our live coverage beginning at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. I just got information from Karen O'Keefe from the Marijuana Policy Project on all of the different tax and dispensary initiatives that are at the local level in Colorado. I'll be posting those up on radicalruss.com just as soon as I put that spreadsheet together. We've got great coverage coming up. We'll have Rick Thompson from Michigan joining us. Eric Altieri from Normal will cover Washington, D.C. for us. Our good friend and former summer intern Priscilla Seiben will cover the Colorado votes for us. So you'll get to hear from Priscilla again. We'll get Kevin Oliver, the head of Washington Normal, to cover the Washington tax vote. I will be live at Oregon Measure 91 headquarters, and I'm still looking to find somebody in Alaska and Guam to give me some coverage. I'm hoping for Charlotte Green. I made a request. We'll see if we can get Charlotte Green on the show, but check that out on Tuesday, November 4th, Election Night, all your coverage right here on 420radio.org. Now, on the show today, we have got plenty to bring to you, including the 420 radio news right after this first break. All sorts of great headlines. They had a televised debate on medical marijuana's Amendment 2 in Florida, and we'll give you some of the highlights of that. Also, that doctor in Oregon who claimed 5 kids died from marijuana, he was forced to retract that in the Oregonian. We've got seniors in California clamoring for medical marijuana. We've got a young father whose daughter was picked up for smelling like weed, and now he faces 20 years in prison. We'll tell you about that. And also the Canna moms who made their trip from across the country to California to access medical marijuana. Then we'll go into Behind the Headlines where, my God, folks, if you didn't catch this today on the social media feeds, I will give you the full update on this. Dr. Christian Thurstone, who's the rehab doctor out there in Colorado, also one of the scientific board members of Project SAM, tried to link the toxicology report of Michael Brown having THC in his system to the reason why he was gunned down in Ferguson, Missouri by Officer Darren Wilson. We'll show you how Kevin Sabet and Project SAM tried to cover their tracks as soon as everybody pointed out how callous and insensitive, not to mention scientifically inaccurate, this statement was. The whole story coming up in Behind the Headlines. Also today, we got drug war data mining and another edition, part 3 of Nick Adenau's Marijuana in Oregon documentary. We'll bring that to you in our Cannabis Cinema segment at 5:30. And at the end of the show, we'll have time for a radical rant. I've been investigating Clatsop County District Attorney Josh Marquis, and we're going to take a look at his selective justice on impaired driving. Why a 19-year-old kid from a rave needs to go to prison for 40 years, but a 60-year-old who chooses to drunk drive gets just probation. We'll talk all about that and more. Plus, we'll take your calls, comments, questions, and more in Toker Talk Radio in Hour 2, coming up at 4 p.m. Pacific Time. Don't forget, Portland residents, folks here in the Portland area, you can catch the Great Marijuana Debate on K2, Channel 2, Sunday at 9 a.m., including my question that totally stumped the prohibitionists. And also, we will be bringing you more coverage as the week goes on. Stay tuned. The news is next. right back after this.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
You can get 420 Radio on the go with the Ustream video app for Android and iPhone. Go to rad-r.us/420Ustream or just click the Ustream app icon for Android or iPhone below the live radio feed at 420.
I'm Richard Harris. I directed Oregon's Division of Addictions and Mental Health and led drug treatment programs for years. I can tell you that treating marijuana use as a crime, arresting thousands for marijuana use, is a complete failure. That's why I'm supporting Measure 91. By regulating marijuana for adults and taxing it, we support drug treatment, prevention, schools, and police. Measure 91 means more treatment and less wasteful prosecution. It's a better approach.
Connect with 420radio.org through social media, on Twitter at 420radio.org, and our Facebook page at 420radio.org. Follow us and like us today.
In all my years on the streets, it's hard to recall a single time where marijuana use itself was the cause of a violent incident. As a police officer, I do believe that passing ballot measure 2 will allow law enforcement to focus on serious issues in Alaska. To me, the regulation of marijuana means safer communities. I'm voting yes on 2.
This communication was paid for by the Campaign to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol. Top contributors are Marijuana Policy Project, Drug Policy Alliance, and Thomas.
It's time for the 420 Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Transcripts of 420 Radio News are available daily on our website at 420radio.org. Now, here's Russ Belville with your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is your 420 Radio News for Thursday, October 23rd, 2014. In a televised debate over Florida's Medical Marijuana Amendment 2, opponent Sheriff Bob Gualtieri said, quote, "This is about smokable marijuana for recreational use because people want to sit around Saturday night with the strobe lights going and Cheech and Chong playing and smoke their pot." End quote. Quote, "It's a medical issue and an issue of compassion," end quote, countered John Morgan, the attorney who is spearheading the push to pass Amendment 2 and often cites the experiences of his brother and father fighting cancer as inspiring his passion for the cause. Polls have shown support for medical marijuana in Florida so far falls short of the 60% needed for a constitutional amendment. Morgan said if it doesn't pass this time, he would, quote, "probably," end quote, try again, suspecting that the measure would do better in a presidential election year. Dr. Ronald Schwartzler, who caused an uproar at a Tuesday night debate on marijuana legalization in Oregon when he claimed that 5 Colorado children died after consuming the drug, on Wednesday retracted his statement and acknowledged he was wrong. Quote, "I really need to retract that statement because I can't back it up," end quote, said Schwartzler, the medical director at Serenity Lane Addiction Treatment Center in Eugene. Schwartzler appeared on a panel debating the legalization initiative, Measure 91, at Portland State University that will be rebroadcast at 9 a.m. Sunday on K2, Channel 2. When the discussion turned to the issue of how legalization has worked in Colorado, Schwartzler said, quote, "Let's concentrate on those edibles. There have been 5 infant children deaths in Colorado that have picked up those drugs," end quote. Several people in the audience began rebutting Schwartzler, yelling, "Not true," and "What source?" After Schwartzler retracted his claim, Peter Zuckerman, a spokesman for the Yes on 91 campaign, called it, quote, "yet another example of how opponents of marijuana reform have for 70 years been using misinformation and scare tactics," end quote, to keep the drug illegal. Residents in the neatly groomed enclave of Laguna Woods, California, where the median age in 2010 was 77, say medical marijuana has become a necessity for many trying to manage pain. They smoke it, eat it, dab lotion mixed with cannabis on sore joints, and summon sleep with a pot-spiked candy bar. Although many of the believers in Laguna Woods Village have used marijuana off and on for much of their lives, 85-year-old Pat McClintock never considered it until her back pain set in. McClintock obtained a medical marijuana recommendation from a doctor in March and joined a collective. Now she exercises every morning, goes to the hot tub in the evening, and squirts drops of marijuana oil into her mouth every night. A Dickinson, Michigan man faces a possible prison sentence after his 6-year-old daughter showed up to school reeking of marijuana. Randall Raymond Fike Jr. on Thursday, October 23rd, pleaded guilty in U.S. District Court in Marquette to manufacturing 50 or more marijuana plants. The charge carries a maximum penalty of 20 years in prison. Fike came to the attention of authorities January 29th after his daughter showed up for kindergarten at Woodland Elementary School in Kingsford, quote, with a strong odor of marijuana on her clothing, end quote, Kingsford Public Safety Sergeant Joseph McGeaney said in a criminal complaint. The principal said the girl told her teacher that her father, quote, was growing marijuana plants in the basement of their residence and that she was not supposed to tell anyone, end quote, the sergeant wrote. Parents from across the country, including a group of moms from Florida, are traveling to the Bay Area of California to give their sick children what they can't get at home, medical marijuana. Quote, we are here for safe, consistent access to medication for our children, end quote, said Renee Petro. It's medication they can't get at home because what they want to give their kids is marijuana. These kids, either with forms of epilepsy or brain tumors, have tried all the pharmaceuticals doctors have recommended. Some have helped, but pot helps more than most. And in Florida, you can't legally buy it. They're living in a gray area of the law in Florida, which allows for CBD oil but does not provide a place to get it. Coming to California to obtain a medical marijuana card when they aren't living in the state of California is likely illegal. They don't care, they'll do whatever it takes, and they've come to learn what they can about the drug, and California is the place to do that. This has been your 420 Radio News for Thursday, October 23rd, 2014. I'm Russ Belville.
.420 Radio is 24-hour marijuana.
The war on marijuana is wasteful, and it hasn't worked. The time and resources available to law enforcement in Alaska is limited. And to waste any of that time or money on marijuana is using a hammer to go after a mosquito. It's just crazy. I spent a career in law enforcement in Alaska. I'm voting yes on ballot measure 2.
This communication was paid for by the Campaign to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol. Top contributors are Marijuana Policy Project, Drug Policy Alliance, and Thomas Cody Swift.
Congressman Doc Hastings stood up for Washington's medical marijuana program and patients like Larry Hartley. Larry and his family are being prosecuted by the federal government, even though they were following Washington's 16-year-old medical marijuana law. On May 30th, Congressman Hastings voted for an amendment that would protect Washington's medical marijuana program and its patients from federal interference. Will the next representative from District 4 respect Washington voters? No, before you vote.
If a doctor has the right to prescribe OxyContin or any type of prescription like that, they should have the right to recommend medical cannabis for that same patient.
In the 1980s, my mother asked me to help a friend of hers who was terribly nauseous and vomiting every single day from her treatment, and my mother begged me, since I was a young adult, could I find marijuana for this woman? And it's a crime that even all these many years later, we still have to illegally get this treatment that really makes a difference for people.
The real concept is Amendment 2 would allow for medical decisions to be made by doctors instead of politicians.
We're asking you to please vote yes on Amendment 2 November 4th because there are patients that need medication in this state and they deserve it.
I am.
United for Care.
Welcome back, everybody. 14 after the hour, and today in Behind the Headlines, we're taking you back to Ferguson, Missouri. And of course, I hope everyone out there in the audience is aware of the case in Ferguson where 19-year-old Michael Brown, an unarmed African-American teenager, was gunned down in the street by Officer Darren Wilson of the Ferguson Police Department. Officer Wilson's on leave, but has not been arrested for what, by all accounts, is a murder. According to witnesses, Michael Brown was staggering away from the car, had his hands up, and was shot 6 times, according to the forensics reports. And his body was allowed to lie in the street of the neighborhood for 4 hours afterwards. This ignited a firestorm of protests throughout Ferguson, leading to cops and militarization in their regular old riot gear, throwing out the tear gas grenades and the rubber bullets, and getting national attention for the militarization of the police that those of us in the drug war community have been well aware of for years. Well, now the toxicology report is out on Michael Brown, and leading anti-legalization groups Project SAM and their scientific advisor, Dr. Christian Thurstone, who's one of the leading rehab entrepreneurs in Denver, posted an article to their Facebook page saying that the death of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, quote, should serve as a tragic reminder that marijuana is not harmless, end quote. Now, according to the toxicology report, Brown had marijuana metabolites in his system, but no active THC in his blood, following the confrontation with Officer Darren Wilson. Now, Project SAM put this up on a Facebook post, and they linked it to an article by Dr. Christian Thurstone, who went on to say that, quote, marijuana consumption often leads to impairment that is very difficult for the public to measure, also making it tough for the public to hold users accountable for the harm they've caused others. Marijuana users also could be vulnerable to aggression and attacks while under the drug's influence, end quote. Only somebody who doesn't know a single pot smoker on the planet could possibly say that marijuana leaves people vulnerable to aggression and attacks. Now, it was unclear if they were trying to say that being high made Michael Brown lash out at the cop, or being high made him more vulnerable to being shot by the cop. Kind of hard to tell by the way they wrote this thing up. But the reaction on Twitter and Facebook was swift and fierce. And in reaction to all this negative publicity and racial tone deafness, Project SAM executive director Kevin Sabet first tried to claim that the views were those of an individual board member and not representative of Project SAM. In a tweet, he told Marijuana Majority's Tom Angel, who, by the way, is the primary source for everything I'm reporting right now. You check him out on marijuana.com if you get a chance, and marijuanamajority.com. But he tweeted back to Tom Angel, quote, Sam has not made any statements about Michael Brown. Those represent the views of Dr. Thurstone, not Sam. But people will misconstrue. Of course, Tom Angel pointed out to him that this was the Project SAM official Facebook page that was posting the article that was written by Dr. Thurstone. So shortly after, he added a comment. Kevin Sabet added a comment on the Facebook page that says, these are not necessarily the views of Project SAM. Dr. Christian Thurstone states on his blog post that his views are his own. We encourage everyone to read the toxicology report that is on his website. Well, that didn't satisfy anyone, so Tom hit him up on Facebook again and said, so you're going to leave the offensive post up on Sam's Facebook instead of deleting them then? And Kevin Sabet replied, yes, we're going to leave the private views of one of our advisors up on our Facebook page, but they don't represent Sam. Why is that hard? But then after saying he was going to stand by it, he did go ahead and delete the post, adding, the post was deleted, clearly causing confusion. These are the views of a science member. Now, prior to these remarks tying Michael Brown's death to marijuana use, Project SAM, of course, has been making a concerted effort to engage the black community in the struggle to defend prohibition. You'll often hear Kevin Sabet and Project SAM say things like, well, legalizing marijuana is not going to help the black community because you know how liquor stores there's so many more liquor stores in the black community than there are in Beverly Hills. Well, that's what big marijuana is going to do. They're going to open up a bunch of big marijuana stores all throughout the ghettos. He doesn't actually say ghettos, but that's what he means. And, yeah, I'm sure my friends in the black community would be really upset about a pot shop opening up on the corner instead of the gangbangers who currently run the marijuana dealing on that corner. This is the most offensive thing Project Sam has done all year, but it's really no surprise.
You're a loony.
No, they're a loony. Actually, I'm a mean, crazy loon, according to District Attorney Josh Marquis. They tried to do this with Trayvon Martin, too. Marijuana smoking thugs. I hope you black kids learned your lesson. Don't carry Skittles. Don't wear a hoodie. And for God's sake, whatever you do, don't smoke pot. Because then cops can just shoot you. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.
420 Radio, the activist radio station. How desperate is the No on 91 campaign to scare you about marijuana?
A couple of things that he talks about is the advocates of this Measure 91 want you to believe that marijuana has medicinal value, which couldn't be anything further from the truth.
The truth is regulation is a better approach than prohibition. Vote yes on 91. This advertisement produced by the Russ Belville Show and is not sponsored or endorsed by the Yes on Measure 91 campaign. 420radio.org is proud to replay the Hollywood Hemptress Hour with Terry Joyce from Portland, Oregon. Terry Joyce is a stand-up comedian and writer and was a former reality television star from the first season of Last Comic Standing. In 2007, she was caught up in a marijuana dispensary raid that made her a cannabis activist. Catch the replays Tuesday at 12 Pacific on 420radio.org. It was a nightmare scenario last May for one Southern Oregon woman. It's 4 a.m. and someone's trying to break in.
911 emergency. My ex-boyfriend is trying to break into my house. He put me in the hospital a few weeks ago, and I've been trying to keep him away.
But because of budget cuts, the sheriff's office is only open during weekday business hours.
I don't have anybody to send out there. So if he comes inside the residence and assaults you, can you ask him to go away? Or
he did break into the home, and he did rape and choke this woman. Meanwhile, it was announced that the Oregon Sheriff's Association made a $100,000 donation to the campaign against Measure 91, the initiative to legalize marijuana. So there's enough money to protect people from marijuana, but not rapists? Measure 91 devotes 35% of tax revenues from marijuana sales to state and local police. Vote yes on Measure 91. A message from the Russ Belville Show, not endorsed or sponsored by the Measure 91 campaign. Arguing for the end of adult marijuana prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It is even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more in this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
All right, welcome back, everybody. 23 after the hour, and today I wanted to take a look at a great little utility that I have used for years now on the web. It's called Ballotpedia. And if you've ever used Wikipedia, you know what I'm talking about. This is just basically an encyclopedia of ballot initiatives at the federal, state, and local level. I've been using this to help compile the information we're going to need for marijuana election night 2014 on Tuesday, November 4th. It's a very easy website to use. If you're familiar with Wikipedia, it shouldn't be too tough. The website address is ballotpedia.org. And from that, you can find all sorts of information. They have a state map where you can just click on your state to find out what's going on. For example, right over here in Oregon, we can click on Oregon and we can welcome to Oregon on Ballotpedia, and everything we need to know for the elections, federal, state, local, and so forth, are there within Ballotpedia. If you're getting ready to vote and you want to be informed on what's going on, this would be a great place to look because you can find tons of information going on in the Ballotpedia. For our Oregon elections, for example, here's the 2014 Oregon elections. And let me blow this up to the larger screen for folks to be able to watch this too. So looking at the ballot there, let me just make that a little bit wider. Come on over there. There we go. So the 2014 on the 2014 ballot, we can click that. state of Oregon will hold elections in 2014, and all the information we need, Senate, House, executives, and so forth. And by the way, let me make this announcement while I'm thinking about it. Not only does my U.S. Representative Earl Blumenauer support marijuana legalization, yesterday, my Senator Jeff Marquis came out in favor of Measure 91, said he would vote for it. The first U.S. Senator to ever admit that he would vote for legalization. And then, of course, local ballot measures is going to give us a list of all the local ballot elections that are happening, GMOs, fracking, minimum wage, marijuana, and that would give us a great list of where we could find that information. There is also other links within Ballotpedia where they keep track of specific topics. And here we just happen to run on the link to local marijuana on the ballot. This will give you a list of all of the measures that are currently on the ballot in various states in all the different years throughout history. So California there, we've got everything going back to 2010 and so forth. If we click this tab for by year, we can find every marijuana vote, or at least many of them, that are listed for 2014. These are the proposals that we'll be covering on marijuana election night. They got 43 of them listed. Now I know of many more, but here's all the California measures, Lake County measures, City of San Jose, City of Saginaw, many city measures and referendums that are being proposed. So from that, we can find, for example, the Washington, D.C. Marijuana Legalization Initiative, Initiative 71, being proposed. And if you wanted to find the details of that, further scrolling would give you the information that you needed. The ballot summary for Washington, D.C. tells us a person 21 years and older will be able to possess 2 ounces of marijuana, grow 6 plants, 3 of them mature, transfer up to an ounce to another person, but not sell. You can give it away. And you can use or sell drug paraphernalia for the use or growing of marijuana. But there will be no commercial aspect to the Washington, D.C. marijuana bill. So voting on marijuana, link on the side, ballot measures by state, by year, and so forth. Again, everything that you might want to find about the ballot measures that are on your ballot. Also, things that we'll be voting on in the future are listed. For 2016, if you're curious about what states might be voting on marijuana legalization in 2016, currently 8 have been filed. Arizona, California, Maine, Massachusetts, Mississippi, Montana, Nevada, and Wyoming. And of course, here in 2014, Alaska, Florida, Oregon, and Washington. Now, Washington State has an interesting ballot measure. A lot of people haven't been talking about this one, but it's an elimination of agricultural tax preferences for marijuana. The measure asks voters whether the Washington State Legislature should repeal or maintain the elimination of agricultural tax preferences for various aspects of the marijuana industry. So folks, it's not even just about whether it's legal or decrim or medical anymore. There's all these minutia, very detailed tax measures that we have to start talking about now that it's legal. Check them all out at ballotpedia.org.
420 Radio, the home of marijuana experts. You know Herb Thrasher from the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour. Now get ready for Herb Age Designs for the proud cannabis consumer. Herb Age Designs, lifestyle gear for the 420 friendly. Herb Age Designs, we've got Frisbee golf discs and durable hemp gear. Herb Age Designs, we've got shot glasses, drinking glasses, coffee mugs, and beer cozies. Check us out on Facebook and online at herbagedesigns.com. And follow Herb Age and Herb.
This November, whether you see the words medical marijuana on your ballot or not, the issue is there. From the halls of Congress to your state capitol or city hall, politicians are already making decisions on medical marijuana policy on your behalf. This election, make sure they are representing you. Every vote is a vote for medical marijuana.
I'm Lori Constantino, former Chief Prosecutor for the state of Alaska. As a retired law enforcement official, I know our current marijuana prohibition laws just aren't working. In fact, they've caused far more problems than they've solved. It's time for Alaska to take a more sensible approach. That's why I'm voting yes on ballot measure 2.
I'm Bill Parker, former Deputy Commissioner of Corrections in Alaska, and I'm voting yes on 2. For me, it's a matter of public safety. We have limited law enforcement resources, and they should be spent addressing serious crimes, not arresting thousands of Alaskans for marijuana.
And I'm Kim Cole, a local high school teacher and a mom, and I want to see marijuana handled in a way that actually benefits Alaskans. The marijuana industry should be managed by responsible businesses and not criminals. This means safer communities, revenue for the state, and jobs for Alaskans. I'm voting yes on 2. This communication was paid for by the Campaign to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol. Top contributors are Marijuana Policy Project, Drug Policy Alliance, and Thomas Cody.
As marijuana moves into the mainstream, more filmmakers are taking a look at all aspects of cannabis culture. These days, marijuana movies are about more than hiding from Sergeant Stadenko or trying to get to White Castle for the munchies. Join with us as we explore the latest in the cannabis cinema.
Welcome back, everybody. Half past, and we've got 2 videos for you in cannabis cinema today. This one just came across the news desk from CNN, where they too have recognized that there's big ratings in marijuana. CNN has announced that they will be telecasting a new reality show following 2 marijuana moguls as they try to build their brand and their business. We're going to switch to that video here and give you a look at that from CNN. Enjoy.
We've got exactly $100,000 in cash in a bag in the back of this car. Fortunately, no one on this highway knows that. There's one of our prisons. I bet there's guys right there in that prison for doing just what we're about to do.
I would say there will be 5 billionaires minted in this industry in the next 3 years.
There's $2 billion to be had next year. I plan to take more than my fair share. We will become a target for organized crime and non-organized crime alike. When people rob banks, they often walk away with less than this amount of money. And here I am with it in my hand. It's all cash.
I don't know where to begin. I mean, you're completely vulnerable.
His plan is brilliant. He's not going after Denver. He's going after every resort town in Colorado.
In Denver, I got to see 5 customers to get the same profit I get out of 1 customer up here.
We are not the Amsterdam or the Rockies. We're Breckenridge, and we don't want that to change.
Oh, I think we're swinging this council. If we're not, we're gonna get a new council. Damn it! How far behind are you putting us with this situation?
Like 2 weeks.
2 weeks is like $300,000.
What, you want me to be a fucking carpenter or grow weed?
That's a $300,000. If we kept this average up, we would do $17 million out of this one tiny location in 1 year.
There's no more games. This is a big boy operation now.
How fast are we getting going on this thing?
Probably go 80.
Yeah.
They're parasites. They're not a reputable business. I don't want them in town, period.
Overnight, Colorado legalized all marijuana.
He's becoming a multimillionaire right in front of our eyes.
We will become the largest weed supplier Colorado has ever seen.
Well, I'm just selling widgets. You know, my widgets just happen to be very popular.
Yeah, the new show High Profits coming out from CNN, and we will have yet to see, you know, what sort of angle they take on this. Doesn't look good for now as far as the shots of people rolling around in money and angry cops and people, but we'll see how it plays out. I always say the more we're talking about it, the more we're winning, and pretty soon people are going to realize that that money needs to be controlled, needs to be regulated, and it's better that we handle it through regulation and legalization than we try to prohibit it and let guys like that be criminals, because somebody's always going to make money off of marijuana. Let's just see that we have some say in how it's handled and how it's taxed. Now, for something that I hope is a little more positive, this is the 3rd part of Nick Adeno's Marijuana in Oregon documentary. Enjoy.
Let's be honest about it. There is a classic story that a lot of people end up having where they have too much edible cannabis. So it's just on us to be as responsible as possible and produce packaging and instructions that are as clear and exact as possible.
Over the past 2 years, the demand for edibles and concentrates has increased significantly. Many claim they are driving most of the sales in the OMMP.
The expansion of edibles and concentrates has grown with the expansion of retail storefronts, right? Now that we're able to have these stores and really start producing varieties, and we have an outlet in which people are kind of coming through every day, and it's a system that's really starting to get its feet cemented in the ground and work out all the kinks, new products are coming online all the time.
Concentrates have gotten a bad rap due to the media's emphasis on the dangers of amateur processing. However, the creation of concentrates can be safe and effective if done professionally. We spoke to Alex, owner of Mad Pharma, to give us a little insight into concentrate processing.
Trim comes into the door, gets processed, frozen. We run it through our extraction machine. It's a closed loop system, which means all the gas being used for extraction process get recycled 99.9%. So we'll really reuse all the gas many times, so there's absolutely no gas waste. After it gets extracted into the oil, goes into the ovens. We purge on a very low temperature for a very long time. We completely remove all the residual gases, so it's just a clean medicine. If you get a gram of concentrate can last you for probably, I would say, maybe 15, maybe even 20 grams of flour. So it's a much smaller packaging, much more discreet. So if you're using a vape pen is just like a regular e-cigarette pen, so it's much more discreet, much stronger. So you need a hit, maybe two, rather than smoking maybe a whole bowl, or even somebody smokes a whole joint.
You know, there's been a lot of negative press around concentrates, mainly because of the method that it's produced. A lot of concentrates are produced through a method called open blasting, which is literally you pack a glass tube full of cannabis and you rubber band a screen on the end of it and you blast a can of butane through it, and essentially that is a very dangerous method because there's gases left over and people blow themselves up, right? So there's a clear public safety issue with the creation of concentrates and the make it in your basement garage type model that we are working on addressing.
So amateur extraction blow-ups, so there's many blow-up labs that there's just gas evaporating everywhere. So you have to do it outside, or if you do it inside, it has to be extreme amount of exchange air inside a room. And then when they blow, they don't extract the gas good enough. So it's not really a medicine. If it has too much gas, it's not good for you. It can be really medicine. Which in a closed loop system, the way that we do it, all the gas gets extracted. So we save 99% of the gas. So there's absolutely no gas being wasted into the atmosphere. And then purging system. So before we ever pull the oil out of our system, it already has been purged twice through the vacuum. So it comes out much cleaner, much better.
Opponents of marijuana legalization often point to the dangers of edibles because of their potency. We sat down with a professional edible maker to learn about edible cannabis.
So I'm Daniel Stoops. My company is Dano Dan Grassworks. The first step is to make the butter. Everything begins with the butter. I access high quality flour and trim. I make large batches of butter by the pound, and I make versions for each strength or potency that I have. It's butter first, and then the caramel is second. And the blocks can be refrigerated or frozen forever. They can come out and get cut up, as you saw today, and packaged and bagged up and go to the dispensaries. That's the gist.
In the current system, every item sold in the OMMP is tested for molds, pesticides, and levels of THC, CBD, and other chemical compounds.
If and when 91 passes, will be the same for molds and pesticides and potency. I think those are very standard. I don't think there needs to be much changing, and I can't imagine there's going to be a lot of impetus to add more testing. It's really pretty adequate what they're requiring. I use source cannabis in flour and trim form, and a certain amount goes into my butter to achieve the right potency. And I've been able to basically use math. Depending on how strong the source grains are, I know exactly how much to put in order to achieve X amount of milligrams per piece and X amount of milligrams per bag, within 5%.
There's liability on both sides of the fence here right now because the industry is so young. It is the responsibility of the patient or the person consuming the cannabis product to know what you're eating, right? You know, you don't go buy the fifth or half gallon of Everclear thinking that you're going to be able to down it like it's a 2 liter of Coke, right? I mean, that's, you know something about that product before you use it, right? And the same is to be said about cannabis. On the other side, it is understandable that because it is a new industry and that people can make assumptions on their own, and that sometimes when they walk into a store, they're not educated. You will always have someone that will walk into a place and just buy whatever they want and be like, I eat pans of brownies all the time, so I'm going to eat 3 of these brownies, and, they have a bad time.
Shortly after Washington passed their legalization measure, edibles and concentrates were temporarily banned to refine regulations.
I do think we're past the bulk of that. I think there's a more calm response right now. I think the manufacturers are responding by coming up with very distinct servings. In Colorado, I think it's a max of 100 milligrams in the bag or in the package, 10 milligrams per serving. That's a fine development. I'm okay with that. In terms of banning edibles, again, I don't see it. I think we're all going to be responsible enough, and I think the manufacturers are going to respond by being very responsible and putting together nice labeling and data and making sure that someone who buys that package, whether it's a patient in the OMMP world or in the rec world if 91 passes, they're going to have the information they need to know exactly how much they need to take to have a nice experience.
There's a lot of pros to the edible market. It allows the older demographic that is not necessarily keen on smoking or smelling or anybody knowing anything about their cannabis use at all to eat and ingest on top of the people who just can't physically smoke. There's a lot of ailments out there that do not allow you to inhale cannabis, and that it's maybe just bad for you to do it in that kind of method. And so edibles are really kind of taking things to the next level and allowing people to be discreet and kind of opening doors for people that had otherwise stigmatized marijuana.
What used to be the counterculture is now an industry, just kind of overnight.
Great work there from Nick Adenow, and he'll have his part 4 when it's available. You'll see it first here on the Russ Belville Show. We got to take a break and pay some more bills, but when we come back, we've got the radical rant of the day, Clatsop County District Attorney Josh Marquis' selective justice on impaired driving cases. Why does a 19-year-old have to go to prison for 4 years while a 60-year-old gets probation? You'll find out when we return.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, fighting prohibition since 2012. Growing plants indoors can be a rewarding hobby, but electricity bills can go through the roof. Then you have to cool down all those big hot lights. It can drive a grower insane. With Lush LED lighting, you can solve many of these issues and double your rewards. Matt and his scientists have developed the perfect light for flowering plants with far less cost and heat. And the results? Very effective. Check out LushLEDlighting.com right now and tell them Radical Russ sent you. In the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Russ Belville Show presents the anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
One joint contains as much cancer-causing tar as 4 cigarettes. Marijuana, it's more harmful than we all thought.
This has been the anti-drug public service announcement of the day. To cure this sort of reefer madness, listen to the Russ Belville Show every weekday on 420radio. Drug treatment Dr. Ronald Schwartzler from the No on 91 campaign explains why to vote yes on Measure 91.
There is no adolescent treatment, by the way, in the state of Oregon. You cannot get your adolescent treated. You almost have to wait till they're 18. By then, the damage has been done.
Measure 91 devotes 25% of marijuana tax revenue to drug prevention, treatment, and mental health programs. Get the facts. Vote yes on 91. This advertisement produced by the Russ Belville Show and is not sponsored or endorsed by the Yes on Measure 91 campaign.
You can't handle the truth.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
You have offended my family.
Hey, this is great, man.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
I know nothing.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
We don't need no stinking budget.
Homosexuality, no. Immorality, general.
Down the centuries, you have slurred the meaning of the words we, the people.
Be warned, this is not your mother's marijuana.
You could ask yourself a question. Do I feel lucky? Or do you, punk?
I want to ask you a bunch of questions. I want to have them answered immediately.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant. Welcome back, everyone. 46 after the hour. And in today's Radical Rant, we're taking a deeper look at Clatsop County District Attorney Josh Marquis, who goes by the Twitter handle CoastDA, at CoastDA, if you'd like to ask him some questions. We're going to talk about the DUI case of one Samuel Martin Kitto. And the reason I want to focus on this, of course, Josh Marquis is the leading spokesperson for the No on 91 campaign. He was in the Great Oregon Pot debate, coming off as smarmy and kind of dickish. You really got to see it to appreciate it. And he's made a point throughout his arguments that our marijuana legalization initiative, Measure 91, does not contain any sort of standard for impaired driving. Unlike the Washington legalization that went forth with a 5 nanogram per se DUID law, we have kept the existing DUI law and directed the Oregon Liquor Control Commission to start scientific study on what should be an impairment limit. Not some number picked out of thin air that satisfies politics, but some actual real science behind detecting marijuana impairment behind the wheel. Marquis has tried to point this out and use it as a negative against 91, saying they have no limit for stone driving. They have no limit for how in the hell will we ever catch the stone drivers? Now, let's ignore for the moment that in Washington state, drugged driving arrests went down from 1,600 the year before legalization to 1,300 the year after legalization. Drugged driving arrests dropped by 300, even with a 5 nanogram standard. Let's ignore that, because if we bring fact, science, reason, and logic into the debate, then Marquis loses already, and I still have another 10 minutes to kill. So this case, the Samuel Martin Kitto case, Kitto case, is one that was brought to my attention in August, end of August, by the headline in our local paper, the Oregonian, "If Oregon legalizes marijuana, how will it keep the roads safe?" And it has the head-on collision picture from the Kitto case. Now, in the story, they point out that this young man, Samuel Kitto, was driving, had fallen asleep at the wheel. His car then ran headlong into another car. There were 2 people in the other car who were both injured, one very seriously. And then there was Kitto and his 3 passengers who were all injured as well, broken bones and such. The prosecutors, and that would be Josh Marquis, the district attorney, and is it Ron Brown, I think the guy's name, the deputy district attorney, were convinced that Kitto caused the crash while high on marijuana. And so they charged him with assault and driving under the influence. Now, Kitto's drug tests came back from the Portland hospital. They took 2 samples of blood, set them to a private lab. One of the tests
showed scant levels of meth and ecstasy, which Kitto admitted himself that he'd used 3 days earlier. The tests also came back positive for 9-carboxy-THC. That's the metabolite, the inactive byproduct of marijuana. But according to Robert Hara, the forensic toxicologist who analyzed Kitto's blood and in testimony said, quote, "The THC parent drug, which is active, was not there. No active THC in blood. Would not have even been a DUI under Washington's 5 nanogram DUI limit. Had 0 nanograms in his blood." Now, the tests do say that it was likely he had smoked marijuana within the last few hours. But by themselves, they could not prove he was high at the time of the crash. Now, did that cause District Attorney Josh Marquis to realize that, my goodness, kid had no pot in his system? A charge of driving under the influence of marijuana wouldn't be appropriate in this case. Ha! No, of course not. Marquis went on to prosecute this trial, couldn't get the serious assault charges to stick, but did get the marijuana DUI to stick. And because of that marijuana DUI charge, Samuel Kitto, age 19, is now a felon for life. For the rest of his life, will have trouble getting jobs, will have trouble getting loans, licenses, security clearances, and is currently serving 4 years in the Eastern Oregon Correctional Facility in Pendleton, Oregon. Now, I am not here to excuse a wreck. This was a serious wreck. Some people were seriously hurt. But try the kid for what happened. They were at a party the night before. They stayed up late. They got up the next morning. The kid was too tired to drive. He wasn't impaired by marijuana. Now, you want to try him for impairment from being sleepy, from being fatigued, which, by the way, is the #1 cause of impaired driving wrecks. By all means, do it. And if you can get a conviction of driving too sleepy and the kid's a felon for life, fine. But he used the scare of marijuana to get a felony conviction for this kid for 4 years. And if that wasn't bad enough, folks, here is the final line in the Oregonian story. Quoting District Attorney Josh Marquis. Quote, "In fairness, I can't say this guy was entirely under the influence of marijuana. I think the jury wasn't all that sure either." End quote. The district attorney admits that he cannot prove that in his mind, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the guy was under the influence of marijuana, and still puts him in prison for 9 years and ruins his life. Okay, Russ, this just might be, a case where you, as a marijuana guy, are taking personal offense to this. The kid did get high. He did admit going to a party, a rave the night before. He did drive his car too sleepy. He was fatigued. He fell asleep. He went across the center line. He hurt somebody. So I decided maybe we ought to look at some of the other cases that Josh Marquis has prosecuted. Now, I can't say for sure he was the lead prosecutor in this next case. Maybe it was the deputy DA, but it was Clatsop County. It was Astoria, Oregon. See if I can find this story for you. Find the right story. Where are you? Oh, I got to find the other guy's name. Sorry, I thought I had this one pulled up. There we go. That's the link. Let me just read you this little story. Astoria man sentenced for DUI crash that injured his wife. This was this month, folks. This month in Astoria, Oregon, Clatsop County, Circuit Court. An Astoria man who injured his wife in a crash while driving under the influence of marijuana and alcohol in mid-April was sentenced Friday in Clatsop County District Court or Circuit Court. John Niemi, age 67, from Astoria, was sentenced to 2 years probation, 2 days in jail, 30 days house arrest, and 1 year's driver's license suspension. The sentence stems from him pleading guilty to fourth degree assault, driving under the influence of intoxicants, and second-degree criminal mischief. He was on his way home from a dinner and auction with his wife when he drove and struck a retaining wall in his Mercedes-Benz. The cops had to use the jaws of life to free the wife from the car. And basically, the toxicology test, you remember the Sam Kitto kid who got the DUI marijuana 4-year felony prison time with 0 THC active in his system? This 67-year-old guy who drives the Mercedes, his blood alcohol content was 0.15. Twice, more than twice, almost twice the legal limit. Almost twice the legal limit. Now, it's kind of apples and oranges, because in one case, you have a 67-year-old guy driving a Mercedes from a upper crust dinner and auction in Astoria who only ran into a wall and only hurt his wife. And in the other case, you've got the kid who was driving, what is this, a Subaru? Who ran headlong into another car and hurt 6 people, one of whom in the other car, by the way, just so happens to be a millionaire member of New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's cabinet. And then I thought maybe we should look up another case. And I haven't yet found this case yet, but I have heard tell of this case. And once I find it, I'll bring it to you here on 420 Radio. But I've heard allegations that there's another case from the same rave where Samuel Kitto had partied the night before, where one of the other ravers got into his car, drove it off of a dirt road, ran over some of the people who were in their tents at the rave, injuring them, who was high at the time. This guy was taken and given a trial, not in the main court where the news cameras were like Samuel Kitto, but in the basement with not much made about it. Where Samuel Kitto was initially arrested and held on a $500,000 bond, this other guy was arrested and then released on his own recognizance. This is what's been alleged. This is what I've heard. Again, I'm working to verify the details of that story. But what I have found so far is a little bit of selective prosecution on the case of an overzealous prosecutor here who hates marijuana and wanted to send a message, wanted to make an example of Samuel Kitto, wanted to polish his bona fides on being the anti-rave guy who's going, I'm going to shut down those kids who are partying in the forest, by God, with their marijuanas and their ecstasies. And of course, you know, if a high-profile member of the governor's cabinet from New York is injured and has to have major surgery to repair her intestines, well, my God, that's just all the more reason to ruin a 19-year-old kid's life. It's a sad story, and I'm not saying Samuel Kitto shouldn't have gotten any punishment. But the justice system needs to work with the facts and not with the reefer madness. If DA Marquis had prosecuted this guy for the assault charges, for the fatigue, for falling asleep at the wheel, then we wouldn't even be talking about this. But knowing in his mind, he admits to the Oregonian that beyond a reasonable shadow of doubt, he did not think the guy was impaired by marijuana, and then goes forward and prosecutes him successfully for being impaired on marijuana. That kind of bigotry ruins lives, Mr. Marquis. I ain't going away, pal. Something about calling me a mean, crazy loon has somehow motivated me. But that's all the time I got for Hour 1. Stay tuned for Hour 2, Toker Talk Radio. We'll take your calls at 971-533-7111. For everyone here at 420 Radio, thanks for joining us. I'm Radical Russ. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you